Hey, good to see you
Good to
again.
see you, Alan. Hi, Neil.
Hey, Foster.
Do you want to say a few words and I'll say something, Neil? Or
Yeah, well, I have the bio, but should we do the bio or should we freestyle
do
it?
the bio and then I'll add my own personal connection. Why don't you
Okay.
read the bio?
Sounds good. Let me just pull it up. So everybody, I'm really excited to introduce you to Foster Gamble that a lot of you probably have heard of. And this is the first time Foster has been on Portal to Ascension. I connected with him about 5-6 months ago because he was on a MUFON event that I was helping produce. And then that was the connection right there. And I had to definitely follow through with it because I wanted to bring his awareness onto this platform because of all the amazing information that he shares and the work that he's done. So here we go. Here's a little bit about Foster. Foster Gamble, born in November 1947 in Cincinnati, Ohio, is the great-great-grandson of James Gamble, one of the numerous heirs to the Procter & Gamble Corporation. Foster Gamble is the son of David Gibbs Gamble and Priscilla Reed Gamble. Foster attended high school at the Choate School in Wallingford, Connecticut, before studying at Princeton University. In 1997, he co-convened the Sequoia Symposium, a multidisciplinary scientific think tank exploring perspectives on unification theory. He also founded the Mind Center Corporation, which holds a patent he developed for an electrode-supporting headset issued in 1990. Gamble worked at the company based in Silicon Valley for 7 years. Married to Kimberly Carter Gamble, the couple founded Omni Center, which later became Clear Compass Media in 2012. The company film Thrive, which was released in 2011 and has been translated into 27 languages, and Thrive 2 was released last year, September 26, 2020. Foster wrote the foreword to Cosmometry, exploring the holofractic nature of the cosmos. His scientific studies include new physics, cosmology, and cosmic geometry, which he accredits with directing his interest into discovering ways to access clean and inexpensive, if not free, sources of energy. Foster has served on board of directors for Concentric Media and Notice Foundation, as well as on the scientific advisory board of the University of Science and Philosophy. And go ahead, Alan, do you want to share your experience with Foster?
No, that's great. Well, I first want to say thanks, Foster, for the interview we did. It's posted and I'll send that to you. I mean, I've done it a while ago, but even with that great introduction, I have to say Foster, as far as is a humanist. So I trust the information and the progressive nature of what he has to bring to us because he's interested in the totality of human beings thriving. Those 2 movies he did with Kimberly are revolutionary because they give us a foundation of how it's possible to thrive as human beings, which is why we incarnated in the first place. We did not come here to survive. We came here to thrive. And Foster and Kimberly gave us that gift. So I know your passion and dedication to bringing humanity up to that level of thriving. So when you say something so radical, like we don't need any authority, it's just like for a moment, which is great. It takes me back. It's like, what? And then I contemplate that and say, wow, that's you're right. And this like giving over our power to authorities like somebody else who's not as educated or well-versed in the cosmos knows better than us to lead the way. I think we've sold ourselves short because we haven't thrived in those conditions. We've hardly survived. So what Foster and his radical, I have to say it is radical. So stay tuned, guys. Buckle down your seatbelts because Foster gives us a real wider view to contemplate the realities of this world. Michelle, you want to say something? Because Michelle Anderson.
I want to get to Foster and what he's going to present, but I just wanted to pop on really quickly and say, I do believe what Foster's doing is leading the way for us to co-create what we want to see on Earth.
Right.
And I tell everybody to go watch Thrive 2 during these times. These are monumental times. And Foster, I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing. You're tireless, you're motivational, and I can't wait to see what you're going to present.
Thank you,
Yes.
Michelle. That means a lot. I'll pass it on to Kimberly and the team too.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the lead too, Foster, and putting yourself out there and showing a direction that humanity can thrive. So
Thank you.
take it away. It's yours. The stage is yours.
Well, I was hoping this was going to be a conversation.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
let's do that.
Okay, I'm back. Let's have a conversation. Yes.
Yeah, I thought I was just going to have a conversation with you and Neil. There,
Okay.
there are things that I definitely want to talk about,
Mhm.
and so I'm happy to kind of kick it off in a particular direction. But it's an honor to talk with you guys, and I'm happy with wherever we want to go in this conversation.
Well, let's do you think maybe we should start out with a little backstory of you, just for those who maybe do not know about your journey that took you to, to waking up and even wanting to create Thrive in the first place? Yeah,
well, you filled in the logistical history very thoroughly. I appreciate that. But in terms of motivation, ever since I can remember, as a young child, I was breaking up fights and saying to people, this isn't necessary. This isn't necessary. There's another way. I wasn't sure what that way was. I saw it embodied in my parents. I had fabulous parents, I'm proud to be able to say, and a lot of really good friends and siblings. So I saw it embodied, but I didn't know until much later in my life how to resolve conflict and how to find the principles that are underlying our conflict, the destruction of whole systems, and then the way of harmony, which is aligning with whole systems. So I thought when I was in college, I knew that there were some problems, there were some environmental problems, it was the Vietnam War and so forth. But I was so convinced that humanity was on track that I thought a few years after college, we would be thriving as a species. Obviously, that didn't happen. And I committed myself to finding out what's in the way of our thriving and what can we do about it. I was fortunate to be in a position as an undergraduate with a couple of allies to create the filmmaking department at Princeton because they didn't have one, and that's what we wanted to do, and they let us do it. So I found out what it took to make a film and realized it took far too much time and money and hassle to do about something trivial. So I told my friends, I'm going to work on this question of what's in the way of our thriving and what can we do about it. And when I get that, then I'll make a film. I thought it might be 5, maybe even 10 years. Well, 42 years later, I finally felt like I understood sufficiently what was in the way of our thriving, but also the solutions that were commensurate to the problems. Because I didn't just want to put out a sky is falling film. And fortunately, that's when Kimberly and I came together to collaborate on this, fell in love making the film. And then, kind of the rest is history. We didn't know if the world would be ready for what we offered, but it went on to become the most widely seen documentary in history, at least at that time. So obviously humanity was ready for the tough truth about what's destroying the wholeness of natural systems, but also is eager to know what can we actually do to solve it. So that's what motivates my entire life.
Right. And the two most important takeaways I got from Thrive 1 and Thrive 2 that you're really focusing on is free energy, because when energy is abundant, humanity becomes abundant. We cultivate the deserts, we have enough water, people can live in a thriving community with energy. Right now, we're slaves to energy, all of us, no matter. And of course, it gets rid of the corporate control over politicians and all that. So free energy and this whole idea of anti-authoritarianism, those are, I think, the two foundations of what so important about the Thrive work. Do you want to talk about each of those and see where we're at?
That's exactly why I'd love to start off speaking there. And I love the theme of your work, Neil, and particularly these series of conferences of the portal to ascension. And I read that you got that in a dream. That's how I've gotten a lot of my guidance and titles and so forth. But I want to start with that question. Well, what the heck is ascension? You know, there's a broad swath of humanity now that is really consumed with ascending. So, okay, where are we going? You know, why are we trying to leave here, and what are we ascending to? And you know, one of the a friend of mine, and I think probably of yours as well, Neil Rogan, who is a very enlightened being and a very funny guy, said, you know, it's great to expand your consciousness, to expand your awareness, but what really matters is, what are you aware of? What are you expanding your consciousness of? And so I want to talk about the ascension for a moment, because I do validate what you and everyone else that I've been listening to in your conferences is talking about with ascension, because you can feel it inside yourself. We can feel it in the species. We are ascending in some way. It feels like uplifting. I was, as you mentioned in the intro, Neil, I founded and ran a company for 8 years in the 80s in Silicon Valley that was based on, we had developed the state-of-the-art in brainwave biofeedback technology. So we were training people for stress reduction, creativity, and mostly for spiritual expansion, and in a very grounded way. And we worked with yogis and Zen masters and Qigong masters and so forth, doing a lot of testing and so forth, so that we saw that the more expanded the state was of these masters, and also any of us, when we're in the brainwave chamber, we could see that as our state expanded, our frequency actually lowered. You know, you go down into theta, and some of the most advanced would even go down into delta, where most of us are asleep and not even dreaming. And they could be talking to us at the same time that they're in this very slow, vast brainwave. So for a while I thought, okay, why are we talking about increasing our frequency when actually what the masters are doing are decreasing their frequency? So, but then the field of brainwave monitoring and feedback has evolved to where now they're measuring in a much higher range, in the gamma range, and realizing that as they're lowering their frequency in one octave, they're expanding it in another. So we've all intuitively felt that ascension that is now being measured even on the electromagnetic level, much less moving into the astral plane and the causal and all of these other simply realms of frequency of existence. So,
do you think that has to do, because he just stimulate, as we approach the speed of light, get faster, this is the theory, the time slows down. So as we become more accelerated, we're slowing down the perceptual aptitude of time space.
Well, it's a very interesting question. I spent years discussing this with probably another mutual friend, Dwayne Elgin. Dwayne was the first person I heard to explain E equals MC squared as that you have this speed of light, the C, and that's one C, but C squared. What's the other C that you're multiplying it by? And the speed of rotation of the torus in an electron is C. It's the speed of light. So if the realm that we're living in, all the material world, is made up of these whirlpools of light, as Sheila was describing, that are revolving at the speed of light, then the other C is the speed at which our spirit is emerging at the center of the torus into this realm of reality. So if we accelerate our physicalness toward the speed of light, we begin to outrun the rate at which we are emerging. so it's actually, that's another metaphor for just, you know, one of the things I wanted to talk about, which is that the nature of the cosmos is dual. In fact, here's a model that I use where if you shrink these together, you have, oh, it just fell apart in one way. If you pull these together, you've got a cube in the center. And as the cube expands, then there's I'm sorry, the other way around. There's an octahedron in the center. As you expand the octahedron, you get a cube in the center, and vice versa. That's the pulse that's going on all the time. We all have our duals. Sheila was just talking about the etheric double. That's another, it is like a geometric description of the etheric double. So as we are expanding ourselves, we're also moving more deeply into the black hole at the center of our being. Not only is there a black hole at the center of each electron and each atom and so forth, but there's a black hole at the center of our being. That is our center. I think that's the reason I chose this particular animation as a background. This is from Thrive 2. It's a depiction of movement through the unified field. This is another kind of glimpse of what I consider to be the portal to ascension, which is the very center of our being. So the more expanded we are, the more grounded we are, the more grounded in that black hole. And that's the center from which we are connected with every other Taurus in the cosmos. Not only connected, but we are one with it in our consciousness.
I just thought of this thing I had thought of when I first heard Nassim's ideas about black holes, the nesting of black holes, that there must be a black hole in the center of our heart, because that was what makes it pump in this toroidal way. Right. And it's been called the forever muscle if you keep that black hole happy, if you keep that black hole expanding.
That's a good way of saying it. I like it. And the toroidal dynamic, it is one of the beauties of it is that it is distinct. Just like if you see a whirlpool in a stream, you can call it a whirlpool, but it's still part of the stream. But the toroidal dynamic gives it an existence, an identifiable existence, and yet it's not separate from the universe. And it's a good metaphor for us as well. We are toroidal dynamics and we are distinct. That's the soul that Sheila was talking about. It's actually the ego, being able to identify as that is the healthy ego that can get destroyed or covered over by the false ego. But one needs an ego to have a distinction in the universe. Otherwise you go crazy. And at the same time to realize that we are unified. We end the Thrive 2 with the Sufi master Rumi's, the poet, his statement that, remember, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop. So there's that distinct and unified all the way along. And that's what the free energy inventors are finally manifesting. I mean, I think that Tesla was doing it 100 years ago, but it's been suppressed for a century. I think the people who built the pyramids were doing it, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. But now it's coming back around. This simple realization of the patterns of the universe are allowing us to access energy, just like we do in meditation. The energy that you access, light in meditation, you don't get that by fighting yourself or by fighting the universe. You don't get free energy by exploding something or by crushing it or burning it or fizzing it or fusing it. You get it by dancing in resonance with the universe. And I've seen probably 6 or 7 different working free energy devices. They all have different approaches. Some of them are tuning radio frequencies. Others are rotating magnets. Others have coils where they get electrons going in these vortices, and then they create a geometry of these vortices, focus it into the center, and all of a sudden there's 20,000 volts of continuous electricity. And I could go on and on with the different styles, but what they have in common is the principle that they are mimicking the toroidal dynamic and then putting the device into harmonious resonance with the unified field. And as long as we don't violate it, lo and behold, all the energy we need comes out in a clean, healthy and inexpensive way.
But how close are we to actually having that on our desk, powering our house? I mean, that's the big question, right?
Yeah, well, it's no longer a technological question. It's a political question and a security question. And I'm obviously, as I depicted in Thrive 2, I'm working with numerous of these inventors around the planet. And the effort to do that has been stalled for 1.5 years because of COVID travel lockdowns. But those are starting to lift. And there's one country where 2 of our best inventors are, and they have basically been locked away from the investors and the engineers and the clients and so forth who want access to this. But that's supposed to lift within the next 2 weeks. We're very close. And we have major investors, major players in the international energy field who are actually really good and honest people and who want to get this out to the world. And we've got the engineers poised to do final vetting for them. So I believe that we will see the toothpaste out of the tube within the next 1 or 2 years.
Okay, and do you think there's going to be less kickback then? Because you're saying basically the elites governing corporations, right? They don't want this to come out because it's about the bottom line for them, which is, you know, money and greed. So do you feel that within the next 1 to 2 years, we may have like a sociopolitical shift that it will be allowed to come out, or maybe just small groups of people will bring it out?
I don't think it will be allowed by those institutions to come out. Their vested interest is just too great, and their behavior is too bad. So it has to be strategic. This is where I was for many years. I trained and taught the martial art, the nonviolent martial art of Aikido, and I've learned a lot of strategy from that. You know, I'm not about poking the bear in the eye. You know, I'm about obsoleting psychopaths and creating healthy ways for the rest of us to thrive, and they're welcome to join in as long as they're not violating anyone. So I don't think it's going to be allowed, but I think it's going to be unstoppable. It's going to be coming out in multiple places around the country, and it will some of the intellectual property, some of the unique understandings will be posted on the internet in a way that, then thousands of labs all over the globe will be working on it simultaneously, and then it can't be stopped. And as soon as the first one is out in an unstoppable manner, then it's like, the legalization of marijuana. They can't stop it anymore, so they're going to try to do GMO marijuana and take it over. Same thing with the electric car. They literally were crushing electric cars for 17 years, and now we got electric cars all over the place. Yeah. It's going to be the same way. Our grandchildren look back and say, "What? You didn't have this the whole time? You were fouling your own skies."
Right. Not to dwell on it, but you're right. It is psychopathic for people to say, "I got the power. You pay me for something that is free, like, water, like air, like electricity." So we've all been brought up in a very psychopathic society, which maybe these last 2 years or so have been the revelation of that, so we could see the truth and build a new future in a new direction, which is what you offer. So talk about that.
And the inventors are waking up too. They're waking up to that the safest thing they can do is give it away. They'll get plenty of money and fame and all that kind of stuff. But as long as they're the only ones having it, then there's such a huge target on their back that they're in real danger. And there's one great inventor in South Korea just tried to go public marketing his device by himself. And the energy minister of South Korea visited the lab with his entourage and had a photo op with his arm around the inventor and so forth. And a week later, this guy was dead. His whole lab exploded. And they said in the newspaper that he must have been overcharging a battery. Well, here's one of the most advanced engineers ever to be on planet Earth. I think he knows how to charge a battery without blowing up his entire laboratory. So no, it's still very dangerous, but there are strategies to get it out and just have it be unstoppable. And so we will be living in that new world soon.
Right. Just to back up a little bit, because you talk about the toroidal form being really the structure of the universe, and when you can tap into that form, everything's available. That is the form of thriving. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah. In fact, I have on my desk here a model.
I think Dan just used something like that in the last.
What's that?
Dan Winter, I think.
Dan Winter, yeah. Well, Dan and I have been studying the same things for decades.
Right.
But anyways, if anybody doesn't know, this is a Taurus. It's a big donut or a bagel. It's just it's a big vortex that is spinning at the speed of light in the case of subatomic particles, and at the same time evolving, energy coming in one side, going out the other side. That's the simple explanation of the Taurus. And so that's what these free energy Inventors, all of their technologies mimic that in order to access the energy that's coming in to the center of each of us in every moment.
That's so beautiful. So you're basically, have you, through any of your research and exploration, we're talking about how black holes are basically on subatomic particles and we're made out of infinite singularities, right? So do you believe that we have the potential to be the energy devices ourselves and move into a world where we do not need the external technology? And through your research, have you come across anybody, exploring that concept?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. I think that's really at the cutting edge. And yeah, there's a lot of hoaxes out there, but there are breatharians, there are spiritual masters who are just drinking water and being out in the sunlight and so forth. And it takes a lot of practice to do that. But, if there's one anomaly, then it's not a rule. If a human being can just simply access the energy of the universe without having to chew it, then that shows us what's possible. And I think that I've also seen studies showing that the energy that a healthy person puts out during the day is way beyond the energy that is stored in the vegetables and fruit and meat and whatever that they're eating. So we are already, to a great extent, free energy devices. And anyone who's meditated for a while, you realize that when you find your center, when you resonate with that Taurus aura around you, and this is what the whole Monroe Institute's science is based on, that what happens is you expand your consciousness beyond the physical. And Robert Monroe measured this. The physical energy will decrease, and meanwhile, your etheric energy will increase because your consciousness is moving more out into your aura, into your etheric body. So yeah, I think in the future, we will have less and less need for the body. But at the same time, and this is something I wanted to go into, I think that each one of us is needing to kind of face the challenge of, do I really have to deal with this mucked up physical world with all these failed interpersonal human relationships when I just feel so good when I go and sit on my zafu and, see the 1,000-petaled lotus and so forth? How do I reconcile those two? And my perspective is that we are not here by accident. Each one of us as a soul came into the physical plane in order to learn. And I think particularly people who are on these calls and in your conferences, that you've come here to help, that you've come at a time when humanity is in desperate need of understanding and compassion in order to actually survive the threats that we are under right now. And I think that as we gain that understanding, then we are drawn to move the scientific principles and the spiritual principles into interpersonal principles. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about is for me, the main thing that's lacking, and I go into this in Thrive 2 a lot, the main thing that's lacking if we're going to even survive, much less thrive as a species, is an awareness and alignment with the non-aggression principle. I think we're missing a universal morality. They used to a long time ago, is whoever had the biggest club was in charge of, what went on. Then the church came in, all types of churches with some sense of ethics. And that was great. It was a big improvement. It's just like people disagreed about God's word, so they ended up fighting with each other and ended up killing hundreds of millions of people in crusades and so forth. So then the state came in with the rule of law, justice systems and so forth. But then, of course, that got co-opted because it was under governments which survive only by taxing, taking people's money against their will. So that got quickly corrupted. And that's what's taken us to the brink of self-destruction right now. So when I ask myself, okay, what's the way through this? What we actually need is a scientifically based, philosophically coherent basis for morality. And to me, in the same way that the Taurus is the universal pattern of sustainability, and yet we've missed it. Most of us never even heard of it till recently, but it's right under our nose, literally at every scale all the time. It's the same way with ethics. I know I studied ethics for 10 years and finally realized, oh my God, it's so simple. It's been under my nose the whole time. And it's simply the non-aggression principle states that no one is allowed to initiate force or fraud against anyone else except in true self-defense. If you're under attack, you can ethically defend yourself, but no one gets to initiate force or fraud. You can't kill, you can't assault, you can't rape, you can't cheat. So as Kimberly and I have traveled around the world, the one thing that we've found that everybody agrees to, because you try to get your family to pick a restaurant to go out to, it's tough within a few people to agree on anything. And look at the polarity that we've got in our world about all the isms right now. But the one thing that we have found that everybody agrees to is they don't want to be violated against their will.
Right.
So it's like, whoa, humanity already agrees on a universal morality.
Huh.
So what if that, rather than whoever has the most money and physical power rules, what if that were the basis of society? I mean, nobody wants to argue with that. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say what's underneath that is it's about teaching integrity. It's what the Tao Te Ching,
right.
The Tao, the way of the De, the TE is the integrity. If we understand integrity and kindness and a kind of like we're part of a bigger mind here, and how are we going to keep in integrity with each other and ourselves? And I think the non-aggression principle is a result of that, but we have to understand the integrity of our human system and what kindness and service and love really comes down to. So
yeah, and it's a really important point, I believe, especially for the consciousness community, because the argument I usually get from the conscious community to that as well, that's a great idea, but that you'd need everybody on planet Earth to be enlightened. No, if I had to wait for that, I would be completely hopeless. I'd want to ascend right now and just get out of here. But no, actually, we just need an enlightened rule that people agree to. And if people violate that rule by violating anyone else, then they get the healing or the incarceration or the cancellation of their insurance, their business, whatever it is, right, in order to motivate them sufficiently to come back into alignment. So you can really do whatever you want, but as long as you don't violate everyone else's ability to do whatever they want, and respecting people's private property, including
but it
their
does
land, their material goods and their body.
No, I totally support that. And the question I actually asked you in my interview is like, let's say it's land, and I say, no, this is my land. You say, that's your land. I say, you took that from me. I say, you took that from me. And it's like, who settles, where's the, I hate to use the word authority, but who comes in and says who's right and who's wrong when there's that kind of conflict?
Well, I talked a lot with some Native American chiefs about this, particularly one, Yvonne Peter, who's the chief of the Nitsai-Gwich'in tribe up in, because they've lived extremely harmoniously for thousands of years with each other, with other tribes, and with the caribou and the seals and their forests. And and what they have done is pretty much along these same lines, that if someone starts stealing from someone else, lying, hurting someone else, then the tribe comes together for a healing. And if they get the healing and their behavior changes, great. And they need to make retribution to anybody that they injured. But if it doesn't, then they're banned from the tribe. And that's very dangerous when you're in Alaska on your own. So that's an ancient system which has worked really well. In the modern day, the term for it is dispute resolution organization. So instead of a monolithic centralized justice system, which is essentially completely corrupt, and they keep proving it every day, you have independent dispute resolution organizations which have to compete in the free market for a reputation of priceworthiness and efficiency, reliability. And if they violate anything, if they violate the non-aggression principle, they can be incarcerated, or they'll lose their insurance, they'll lose their clientele overnight. So it's a free market of people who are really good and highly respected, like the Native American elders who would resolve those conflicts. They obviously choose the most ethical people in the tribe to manage the conflict resolution. And that's what we would do also in a free market where every institution and every individual was held accountable to the non-aggression principle.
I've heard like channelers and other people talk about other planets and how they kind of have this authoritative, how does authority kind of manifest over there? And they don't call him hierarchy or authoritative, but more like a facilitator of energy, you know, someone
Yes.
that is basically facilitating the experience, but they don't have any like authoritative power over you. And what you're really touching on here is restructuring society. And I just want to throw this in really quick, that another universal thing that we might have is the fact that everybody just wants to be loved and supported, right?
Yes.
So if we want to all be loved and supported, and even the most hateful people that go out there and maliciously do things, a lot of times it comes from the lack of love during childhood. So if we had that as a universal principle from the beginning of creation, from the beginning of birth, and implemented it in society, we would ensure that people feel supported, acknowledged, and loved. And I think that would also contribute to this, new world.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of phase two. And the key distinction philosophically is that you can enforce the non-aggression principle. You can use force to protect yourself or to protect other people who can't defend themselves. Whereas you can't force someone to love someone else. You can only inspire them to and encourage them to. And I believe when people actually feel sovereign, especially kids, my goodness, the greatest violations that are going on the planet right now is abusing children within families, just even the spanking. In the United States, still over 80% of families are beating children as if that's so. You wouldn't get away with that with another adult, and yet people are doing it to the most defenseless among us, not even to mention the child trafficking and satanic abuse and all that stuff. So I believe that as children grow up in families where the non-aggression principle is in their family and it's in their society, that they will feel safer to love themselves because they will not be abused. So they'll be more trusting. They'll more naturally just express their love toward other people, particularly their own children.
Right. Michelle, you going to jump in for a question?
Yes, this is so resonant for me. And I was on a Zoom call with you, Foster. I can't remember which group it was now, but where you talked about this non-aggression principle and how you even applied it in your own circles, where there were two people that were butting heads. And you gave an example of what you said to each one. And that's part of what I think is happening right now is people, in addition to wanting to feel loved, they want to feel heard. So when you see the polarity with opinions and belief systems, what I'm seeing in families and in friendships where one person's on one side of the fence and the another person's on another side of the fence, then they don't know how to resolve it. And they both shut down and they both say, you're under a spell, you're brainwashed. And they both think the other one's brainwashed. But when you come into it, and I think you use this in your conflict resolution with these people, when you come into it and just listen to the other person's point of view before you get into the dynamic of dialogue, really hearing where their point of view is at, they feel a little more, they feel more accepted. And then you can go into the dialogue of, another belief, but still keep the framework of we still love each other. Why are we going to let this separate us or divide us? Yeah. And another thing I wanted you to touch upon, if you could, in this segment, is you gave some really good advice about finding your tribes. And it's almost like it's thinking globally and acting locally, people that have land and coming together, and how you utilize these principles in smaller groups. So those were my two things.
Well, thanks for expressing so beautifully the dynamic of hearing one another in relationship. You know, if you look to kind of the core of each one of us, which is our blood, you know, healthy blood cells are, of course, little Tauruses, and they nurture our being. They're all in touch with each other through that still point at the center, and they nurture our being and keep us healthy as long as they can remain sovereign. So you look at a healthy bloodstream, which you can do with the dark field, you know, red blood cell microscopes now, and you see that they're full toruses, but they're all separate. They might touch occasionally, but they don't get clumped together. You know, if you're under too much stress, you're eating GMO foods, you're in 5G radiation, you're too acidified, what'll happen is those toruses start collapsing. They start to look like footballs instead of basketballs, and then they start to clump together, and then they will literally block off your bloodstream. You start getting less energy between your brain cells, and then your body starts sucking energy from your organs in order to compensate. And that's when you get a tumor in your, you know, your pancreas or your heart or your brain or something like that. So if we just learn from our own biology, you know, one of my teachers used to ask couples, you know, what do you think is the 3 words that your spouse most wants to hear from you? And of course, most people would say, I love you. And that's great. You know, of course, we want to hear that. But even before that, along the lines of what you're saying, Michelle, it's tell me more. In other words, okay, I'm really here, and I not only heard what you just said, but I want to hear what else you're thinking and feeling, because that engenders love. When you're truly listening to someone, they feel like they are love. We all are love. We all are spirit, but then it gets covered over. And when you're being heard, when you're being seen, that love can come out again. And then you can share that with others, especially by listening to them.
Thank Foster. You know, I love everything you're saying, and I'm so aligned with it. But I also have to say, to just be honest, there's thousands of books of utopian philosophy and possibilities. How are we going to make this a reality in concrete ways? I think it's great that the free energy devices, but this whole other realm of anti-authoritarian, how are we going to change the world? Because it needs changing, like right now.
Boy, it needs it right now more than ever in at least recorded history. I mean, we are on the brink of either complete self-destruction or a global totalitarian state. And it's not going to stop unless those who are awake actually stop it. So when people ask me that question, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, I would say, create the whole system alternative and then collaborate with other people to be ready to protect them. So if you have a truth media, outlet like Portals to Ascension, or like what Dr. McCullough is doing, and Sayer G and Kelly Brogan, and all this truth that's coming out about the power of our immune system and the lies that we're being told and so forth. And now, of course, they're getting censored. You know, cryptocurrency is actually offering a decentralized, honest way for creativity to establish wealth in not a zero-sum game that benefits everyone increasingly. So of course they're trying to stop that. And I could go into every sector, in education, in health. They're trying to stop the whole system's awareness, but they is a very small group of psychopathic controllers. The rest of humanity would give you their shirt in a storm, and they really want each other to thrive. So I think that's what's coming, is people go ahead and create these healthy alternatives wherever your expertise is. And that includes the healthy alternative of cosmic connection that you're doing. Alan, I finished your book, and it's a masterpiece. I absolutely love it. I've been giving it to all my friends. And the same thing with the work that Neil is doing. You guys are showing us that we're not alone in the universe. And and what I would add is the non-aggression principle is not just for this planet. If some really impressive ETs land on the White House lawn tomorrow, we need to not violate them, but at the same time, we need to not bow down like these are the new Anunnaki gods and you're gonna surrender to them. No, it's non-aggression throughout the cosmos.
But what's one thing, hearing you now, I know what you said is great. It's a big plan, but one thing people listening to this can put into action like right now when they leave this broadcast.
Yeah, find your truth about whatever your area of expertise is. And I recommend to people that you sit down, and if you're not clear already, write down what your purpose is, and then what sector you want to work in to improve it, and then what issue you especially want to take on, and then determine whether you want to work on immediate needs, changing systems, or on worldview itself, on the consciousness shift, like probably a lot of people in this audience. And when you're clear on who you are in that way, then you'll get more skilled every day and speak up. Have the courage to speak up, because it's only through having those uncomfortable conversations in our relationships, in our family, in our workplace, in our countries and across the world, and even with interdimensional beings and, cosmic councils and so forth, everywhere. Be willing to speak your truth, because that's what you're here for.
And before you go, just tell us how to plug into your Thrive networks, because you have a lot of this in place that people can just become a part of.
Yeah, thanks. We've got it all centralized at thriveon.com. So you can see both of our films. You can see hundreds of my blogs and so forth, lots of videos. And then also you can join, there's a free trial going on now for my Freedom Portal. I do a show 3 Saturdays a month where I dive into all of these topics on my own, and then as a community, and then also I bring experts on. And then the final thing, which is our big push right now, is we're in beta testing, and we're very close to launching what we call the Solutions Hub, which I personally think is the most needed thing on the planet right now, at least that we can offer. And what that is a decentralized open source platform on the internet and on your mobile phone, where ethical activists in every single sector can establish their own space as an individual or a group, then connect with others across groups, either locally or around the world, and then share best practices and share, techniques and tools and books and petitions and lawsuits and videos and so forth, so that we can together synthesize and synergize as the global community of solutionaries. And that's the unstoppable alternative to a centralized totalitarian one world government.
Beautiful. I appreciate your love for humanity and the effort. You don't have to do this, Foster Gamble, but you've dedicated your life to helping uplift us all so we can all live in a more coherent universe, world, self. So
yes. Thank you, Alan. I always seen and heard with you.
You give us all hope, Foster. And yeah. I know that a lot of people probably jumped on because they needed hope when they came to Portal to Ascension's 4-day summit. And not only did you give us hope, but you gave us the pathway to get there. I just can't thank you enough. You and Kimberly are just heroes in all of our eyes. So thanks for being here.
You are welcome. And thank you for your work, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Foster.
Thank you.
Okay. What do you have, Neil?
Thank you. And Foster, I just want to share with everybody that we're doing a webinar together on November 14th. So if you guys want to go even deeper into Foster's research, we have a webinar on November 14th, noon Pacific, called Thriving in the Unified Field. Do you want to leave us with just like a minute of kind of conceptualizing what you want to share during this event?
Yeah, thriving in the unified field. The unified field is no longer some wild ass speculation. It turns out the mystics were right this whole time. Now the scientists are realizing it. And, Nassim is on the verge. I mean, literally could be within a few weeks that he publishes his unified field theory. And all these so-called separate forces and domains and realms and everything, they're all coming together into a simple, beautiful understanding of how the universe works. And the more we understand what that realization is, the more we can align our physical bodies, our emotional bodies, our minds, our spirits, and our interpersonal relationships. And that, to me, is what the science of love is. That's the mastery of being human being. So that's what we're going to dive into in the webinar. I'm looking forward to just having the time to dive in, and then hopefully do a significant Q&A so we can interact about it. And I appreciate you guys doing this as a conversation today, because, you know, there's plenty of my lectures and talks and so forth that are available on the internet. But when I get to be with people like the three of you, I really benefit from the conversation. I think other people benefit from not knowing exactly what's going to come next.
Right. You know, the science of love, that is such a great thing, an integration of the whole human being. That's my takeaway from this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, anybody who hasn't seen Thrive 2, it's a labor of love. We spent 1,000 days after traveling around the world researching for about 6 years. We made it just as beautiful as we possibly could, but we didn't hold back on what's in the way, and especially the path to thriving. So it's a long movie. It's intense. You might want to do it in segments. It's about 2.5 hours, but you know, settle down with your friends on a couch for an evening and just enjoy the ride. It's really empowering.
And beautiful music by Gary Malkin.
Absolutely.
He's so in touch with
He's
frequency.
the best. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Foster. Thanks.
All right. Love you guys.
Thank you,
See you
brother.
later.
Love you too, man. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.